As the Romans began to make their presence felt in Britain, they would have been drawn to the strategic location of the future London, where the River Thames provided a natural conduit for trade and commerce. The site, with its fertile soils and access to the sea, was an attractive prospect for the Roman conquerors, who sought to establish a foothold on the island and tap into its rich resources. In 43 AD, the Roman Empire, under the leadership of Emperor Claudius, launched a full-scale invasion of Britain, with 4 legions crossing the Channel and landing on the Kent coast. The native Celtic tribes, including the Catuvellauni, put up fierce resistance, but ultimately the Romans prevailed, and their armies marched towards the Thames, where they established a settlement that would eventually become Londinium. The early years of Roman rule in Britain were marked by significant investment in infrastructure, as the conquerors sought to establish a robust administrative and economic framework for their new province. The construction of roads, bridges, and public buildings transformed the landscape of Londinium, which rapidly grew into a thriving commercial center. The Romans built a bridge over the Thames, facilitating trade and communication between the settlement and the rest of the empire. As the city expanded, its inhabitants enjoyed a range of amenities, including public baths, theaters, and markets, which helped to establish Londinium as a major urban hub. One of the most significant events in the early history of London occurred in 61 AD, when the Roman governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus launched a campaign against the Celtic queen Boudicca, who had led a rebellion against Roman rule. The revolt, which began in response to Roman mistreatment of Boudicca and her family, spread rapidly across the province, with Londinium being one of the cities targeted by the rebels. According to the Roman historian Tacitus, the city was largely destroyed during the uprising, with many of its inhabitants killed or displaced. The Roman authorities eventually crushed the rebellion, but not before it had inflicted significant damage on Londinium and other urban centers in Britain. Despite this setback, Londinium continued to grow and prosper under Roman rule, becoming an important center for trade and commerce. The city's strategic location made it an ideal hub for the export of British goods, such as grain, iron, and leather, to other parts of the empire. As the Roman Empire expanded and contracted over the centuries, Londinium remained a vital component of its economic and administrative infrastructure. In the 2nd century AD, the city underwent significant redevelopment, with the construction of new public buildings, including a grand forum and basilica, which reflected its growing importance as a provincial capital. As the Roman Empire began to decline in the 4th and 5th centuries AD, Londinium's fortunes also began to wane. The city suffered from a series of barbarian raids and economic downturns, which weakened its defenses and eroded its prosperity. In 410 AD, the Roman Emperor Honorius issued a decree known as the Rescript of Honorius, which effectively abandoned Britain to its own devices, marking the end of Roman rule in the province. As the Roman legions withdrew from Britain, Londinium was left to fend for itself, exposed to the threats of invading tribes and the challenges of economic decline. The city's fate remained uncertain, as it entered a new era of history, marked by the arrival of Anglo-Saxon settlers and the gradual transformation of its culture and identity. The Anglo-Saxon period in London's history, which spanned from the 5th to the 11th centuries AD, was marked by significant upheaval and transformation. As Germanic tribes, such as the Saxons, Angles, and Jutes, established themselves in Britain, they brought with them their own languages, customs, and traditions. Londinium, now known as Londonwic, became an important center for Anglo-Saxon trade and commerce, with its strategic location on the Thames facilitating the exchange of goods with other parts of Europe. The city's inhabitants developed a distinct cultural identity, shaped by their interactions with other Anglo-Saxon communities and their exposure to Christian missionary activity. As the Anglo-Saxon period drew to a close, London's fortunes began to shift once more. The Viking invasions of the 9th and 10th centuries AD brought new challenges to the city, with the Great Heathen Army sacking Londonwic in 851 AD. However, this tumultuous era also saw the emergence of Alfred the Great, who refounded London in 886 AD, establishing a new settlement on the site of the present-day city of London. The Norman conquest of 1066 AD brought significant changes to London, with the construction of the Tower of London and the establishment of a powerful nobility. The city's strategic location made it an important center for trade and commerce, with the medieval period seeing the emergence of a thriving merchant class. As London grew in wealth and influence, it became a hub for cultural and intellectual activity, with the establishment of institutions such as the University of Oxford and the emergence of notable figures like Geoffrey Chaucer. The Tudor period saw London's population swell, with the city becoming a major center for theater, music, and the arts. The reign of Elizabeth I was particularly significant, with the establishment of the Church of England and the emergence of William Shakespeare as a prominent playwright. As the English Renaissance reached its peak, London became a hub for creativity and innovation, with the city's streets and alleys filled with the sounds of merchants, artisans, and performers. The Great Fire of 1666 AD marked a significant turning point in London's history, with the destruction of much of the city leading to a major rebuilding effort. The subsequent development of London's infrastructure, including the construction of new roads, bridges, and public buildings, helped to establish the city as a modern metropolis. As the British Empire expanded, London became a global center for trade, finance, and culture, with the city's influence extending far beyond its borders. In the words of historian and writer Peter Ackroyd, London is a city that has been constantly renewed and reinvented, a place where the old and the new coexist in a state of dynamic tension. This sentiment captures the essence of London's enduring spirit. As the city continues to evolve and adapt to the challenges of the modern world, today, the history of London, from Roman beginnings to modern metropolis, is remembered as a testament to the city's resilience and determination. The legacy of this epic story can be seen in the streets, buildings, and cultural institutions that make up the fabric of modern London. This epic tale of conquest, diplomacy, and cultural exchange will transport us to a world of warriors, khans, and emperors as we explore the fascinating story of how a group of tribesmen from Mongolia came to dominate the known world. In the early 12th century, the Mongolian plateau was home to numerous nomadic tribes, each with their own distinct culture, language, and traditions. Among these tribes were the Kiyad, the Merkid, and the Neman, who would eventually play significant roles in the rise of the Mongol Empire. However, it was the Borjigin tribe that would produce the most iconic figure in Mongolian history, Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan. Temujin was born around 1162 AD, near the Anan River in modern-day Mongolia. His early life was marked by hardship and struggle, as his family was abandoned by their tribe after his father's death. This experience would shape Temujin's worldview and inform his future actions as he navigated the treacherous landscape of tribal politics and alliances. As a young man, Temujin formed close relationships with other tribesmen, including Jamuka, who would become both a friend and a rival. The Mongolian plateau was also home to various other groups, including the Tunguts, the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty, and the Muslim kingdoms of Central Asia. These neighboring powers would eventually become key players in the Mongol Empire's expansion, as Temujin and his successors sought to unify the warring tribes and expand their dominion. In the late 12th century, the Mongolian tribes were plagued by internal conflicts, raids, and power struggles. It was during this time that Temujin began to build a coalition of allies, using his charisma, strategic thinking, and military prowess to unite the fractious tribes. His vision for a unified Mongol nation would eventually inspire loyalty and devotion in his followers, who saw him as a messianic figure, destined to lead them to greatness. The year was 1206, and Temujin, now in his mid-40s, had consolidated his power among the Mongolian tribes. The title of Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler, was bestowed upon him by his followers, signifying their recognition of his authority and vision. As Genghis Khan, he would go on to lead his people in a series of military campaigns that would expand the Mongol Empire, creating a vast territory that stretched from China to Eastern Europe. The early 13th century saw the Mongols launch a series of attacks against neighboring tribes, including the Merkid and the Neman. These campaigns were marked by brutality, cunning, and strategic genius as Genghis Khan and his generals adapted to the challenges of warfare on the Eurasian steppes. The Mongol army's mobility, archery skills, and intelligence-gathering capabilities made them a formidable force, capable of overwhelming their enemies through surprise attacks and clever tactics. As the Mongols expanded their territory, they encountered various cultures, including the Buddhist Tunguts, the Muslim Uyghurs, and the Christian Karets. These interactions would have a profound impact on the development of Mongolian society, as Genghis Khan and his successors adopted elements from these cultures, incorporating them into their own unique blend of nomadic traditions and imperial ambitions. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.